everybody, this is Jason, and this week we have a special guest presenter, William, and he's going to do his thing. So take it away, William.
Gonna do my thing. Oh, thanks. So this is a follow-up to my last one, which was demystifying the BHAV editor, which was all about how you edit. The editor works. This is really looking at how code hangs together and everything you need to understand before you actually can start writing code. So we're not looking at code writing, we're looking at all the bits you kind of need to understand beforehand, hence unraveling the spaghetti of what Maxis gave us. So we're going to look at the difference between local, global, semi-global resources. We're going to look at the mess, which is the object definition. Going to look at some of the code, how you unravel it. Then I'm going to talk a little bit airy-fairy about how I find code, because you can't really edit something until you've found it. And part of that then is, well, I've found somewhere I can start, but how do I get to where I want to go? So that's the finding and following techniques. So it's going to be a little bit of hand waving, which our audio call is going to be exciting. So there are three types of resources. They are local resources, semi-global resources, and global resources. Local resources are everything that's kind of private to an object, not to be confused with local variables within a BHAV. They are your resources. They're your BHAVs, your BCONs, slots, table, menu items, T-tabs. What they have in common is they all have instance IDs in the hex 1000 range, so 1000 through to 1FFFFF, and that's what makes it local. They are also all in the same group, and they're all in the same group as the main object definition. If you look in SymPE in the Maxis objects.package files, all their groups are in one file and they all have different group identifiers. When we clone an object and we create a copy through Object Workshop, they all get put in this special group of FF, 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 and they're all still in the same group. So you think, well, if I've got an object which is in one file and they're all in FFFFFF, and I've got another object in another file also in that same group, why can't one object A, say, call a BHAV that's in object B? And the reason for this is when the game actually loads these, any resources which are in that special group, it takes the file name and it hashes it and it produces a unique group ID, and then it moves all those resources into that unique group ID, and for the other object it will move them into a different group ID. So even though they appear to be in the same group, this special 8F groups, they end up in game in different groups. And if you want to see what those groups are, you can actually find them if you look in the groups.cache file. Once your game has been running for a bit, you can open it with SymPE. So local resources, they're all in the 1000 range and they're all in the same group as the object they belong to. Global resources are accessible by any object. So we know that there are global BHAVs, things for asking if a sim is of a certain age or managing bits of inventory and things. Globals all have instant IDs in the range hex 100 through to FFFF. And they are always in the global group, and that's that 7FD4CD0. So any resource with a range with an instance in 100 through FFF, and in that group can be accessed by any object. So they are truly global. Anything can get to them. It's resources which is shared by everything. There is a type of group that sits between local and global, and they're called semi-globals. This is like a library of resources, BHAVs, BCONs, menu entry T-tabs, which are shared by objects of the same kind of thing. So there is a chair semi-global group which all the chairs access. There is a lights semi-global group which all the lights can access. Yeah. And semi-globals have instances in the 2000 through 2FFFF hex range. And they're in a group which the object definition can locate. Now, so you've got your three groups. Local, only the object can access it. Global, anything can access it. And semi-global, things of the same type, chairs, tables, pictures, access and share their resources. Now this leads on to Latmos's question, which was, how does an object know what its semi-globals are? And why does SymPE limit me to certain things? I'm just going to pull up SymPE. So Latmos's question was, why when I hit this and there's this little button over here by the opcode, hopefully this time I'm actually recording my cursor as well, why when I click on that does it restrict me to BHAVs which are in this package, this group? How does it know it's this group? Painting semi-globals, the globals, and the primitives. Well, it limits you to this. It has this package because that's probably, from a programming point of view, where the resource is that you want to access. So, you know, that's fair enough. That's probably what you were looking for. This group is anything in the same group number as the object. Now, in this case, my group being FFFF, it's going to be whatever is in this file. But if I was editing a group from, or a resource from a Maxis object, which would have its own unique group ID, yeah, then it would also pull up all the resources from that same group. And those are basically your local resources. They're the things the object can get to. Painting globals is everything out of the semi-global group. They're all got 2000s. Global is everything out of the globals group, and primitives are the low value stuff. And that's all an object can access. There is nothing else that an object can actually access, so there's nothing else you'd want to go and find. It is that simple, really. So how does it know, in this case, that we have access to the painting globals? I'll tell you how we find this in a bit, but there is an entry called global data, rather confusingly, because it's got nothing to do with globals, it's got everything to do with semi-globals. And that entry, that resource has an entry in it that says painting globals and then group number, and that's where an object gets its semi-globals from. And you can only have one of those per object. So, can you even go to force it to look for an opcode that's unrelated to any of that? No. It's not possible because of the way Maxis have set up the object structure. An object has local resources. It can access one shared community of resources for things like chairs, paintings, whatever. And it can access the globals. So what if my object is supposed to be a mix between two objects that have different object labels, for example? Well, you're stuffed. Pick one. Pick the one that's got the most of what you want to access, and then perhaps if you've only got 2 or 3 resources that you need to get from the other group, then you can copy the code or you can copy the resources across. There are ways to fudge an object to be a mix of 2 objects, and there is a banner object in Maxis which is also a light, and they pull very interesting effects by creating a secondary light object off world and then hooking the two together, and it's interesting, but it's complex, and it's certainly not something I'm going to cover here. So the short answer, Latmos, is you can't. You've got locals, one semi-global group, and the globals is all you can get access to. Does that answer your question?
It does. Thank you.
Hopefully we now understand the 3 different types of resources, because it is not an obvious way to do things, especially if you've got any object-orientated background where objects can inherit from multiple objects, and you can just keep chaining these things down. Don't work like that, and you're stuck with what Maxis have given us. So, any questions on locals, semi-globals, globals? Okay.
Well, it does seem, because I remember asking you about this when I wanted to make, I don't know what it was, an item or an object that was like a combined sink and stove or something. And like it does seem like it's still possible, like just very tedious. And it wouldn't work with like mods that affect like sink behavior or stove behavior depending on which one you base the thing on, right?
If you've got something that's say a sink and a stove, then you need to pick which one it takes most from.
Yeah.
So if it's mainly a sink, make it part of the sink globals. Then what you can do, semi-globals, then what you can do is you can copy the stove semi-globals into the local object. You can move them out of the 2000 range, put them in the 1000 range and call it. The problem with that is if you then have any mod, as you say, that changes the behavior of stoves. Global mod changing the behavior of stoves. Obviously, it doesn't affect yours, and you've then got to go back in and keep updating the code. So yeah, there are ways round it, but they're not pretty. So. So the next section is what the hell is this object definition all about? And rather than go through a set of slides, I'm going to actually take one to pieces. So from an object point of view, the central point is this object definition resource. We're usually looking at it from where does it live in the catalogue, but from a programming modding point of view, there are much more important fields. So one of the first questions is, what is an object called? Well, an object actually has 3 different names. The first one is what it's called in the file name in the object data itself. This gets ignored by quite a lot of creators. They fail to change it. You'd be surprised how many sculpture vases or sculpture flamingos there are out there. The downside to not changing that is that's the one that's displayed in log files. So if you get an error and it says you've got an error with sculpture vase, you have no idea which one of your custom objects was actually generating that error. So kind of a good idea to change that. The other one that is sort of modders do change is what appears in the catalogue. And how you find what appears in the catalogue is we look at the object definition, we take its instance number, 41A7, and we take its group, FFF, and we go and look in the CTSS resources catalogue descriptions. And what we do, we don't do that. So if you look under, sorry, ahead of myself. Right. If we look under the object definition, down here you will find a catalogue strings ID, and that points to 7D0 in this case. And if I go and look in the CTSS entry, 7D0 is my catalogue strings. That's what appears as the catalogue name and the catalogue description. If I change this, for reasons known only to myself, say, to 7D1, I've just disconnected it from the catalogue name and description. An object's name is not what is in the CTSS because the CTSS is there. There is a link from that field, catalogue strings ID, to that CTSS entry. It's almost always 7D0, but if you look on multi-tile objects, sometimes you get different entries there. So that's what's displayed to the users. The other name that comes up is one under nref. Now, nref is a bit of a weird one because you don't need it, and in fact I would recommend you delete it. It's found because it's got the same instance number and the same group, and if you've generated this with Object Workshop generates you a very strange name here. Now, this is also displayed in the log files, and it's displayed as the from entry. Just go back to my slide. From accessory clipboard of tasks, because that's what my nref is. However, if you delete that nref entry, it will put in the file name that the object was located in, and that is usually much more useful when you're debugging your own code. You know, oh, an object threw an error and it's in, you know, WH accessory clipboard of tasks .package or whatever. So bizarrely, an object has 3 names, just to confuse the issue. So the next it was, how does an object find its globals? Well, from the object data, we just look for the group. We look in the global data, and there should only ever be one of those global resources, and it's because it's in the same group. That is what it picks up. I'm pretty sure this instant one is can be anything. I've seen them in the packages file, their instance 80, their instance 81, they can be instance 1000. I'm pretty sure that instance number is not actually used to locate the global data resource, but it is that resource that says this is what my semi-globals are, my painting globals. So this OBJD is a spider's web. It leads out. So that's what it's called, that's what its semi-globals are. So what does an object look like? Well, you know, again, the object data tells you this. If we run down to default graphic, an entry of 1, could be 2, could be 3, could be 4. So we remember that number. Go and look in the text lists entry, and it will always be text list hex 85. And then whatever is in entry 1 is the default mesh for that object. So again, there is an entry in the object definition that says use entry whatever it is, go and look in string table 85, look at that entry number, and that's the cres that it will be looking for. So everything comes from the object definition. Let's just pop back to the slides. Yeah. So, going back to the object name, saying that many people failed to change the object definition, I just went through some of my own custom content, and I have 3 different blinds, all called curtains colonial long, and 2 different blinds called curtains quaint short. So if this one generates an error, it would have told me that curtains colonial long threw the error, and I'd have no idea which one of this it was. So, content creators, please change the object names. Semi-global's object looks like. So, what does an object do? The number of times I've heard people say, oh yeah, and the init function is called init, and it's it's called function dash init, and that's where an object starts running from, and its main function is called function dash main, and it runs that code. Not strictly true. From the object definition, if we take the instance number 41A7 and its group, and we look in the object functions, OBJF, and we find the one that matches, so the same instance and the same group, this table is what tells an object to run. So its init function is because the entry under function init, the action, is 1002. Yeah? That's the one that gets run. I have one called init common, which is 1001. Never actually gets called. It's just completely redundant code that Max this left line around. The one that gets called is 1002. I could change it to run init common if I wanted to, by changing that value to 1001. And now it's running the other BHAV. Doesn't have to be called init, it could be called do something funky. Really doesn't matter, it's finding it by instance number, and the same for main. It's finding it because it's instance 1000. Sometimes these you'll find that they're actually a call to a semi-global main. Things like chairs that slide themselves in and out, they go nowhere near local BHAVs, they just call straight into the semi-globals. And there are a whole load of other interesting stuff. When a lot is loaded, you can run code. You can run code to see if a user is allowed to pick an object up. You put code in the Guardian, and if it returns false, then you can't grab it with the little hand thing. A lot of these down here, cook, surface, food, when a sim is looking for something, if an object has an entry here, it will use that. So if you look at chairs, it has an entry under sit. Start live mode, or live mode, however you want to pronounce it, and stop live mode are quite interesting. This one gets called when you move from build to live, and the stop gets called when you move from live to build. So if you want an object that's only visible when you're building and automatically hides itself when you go into live mode, you can put code in here which will hide and unhide itself. I've got a fire hydrant that controls drive-by cars, and it uses that technique. And there's all kinds of interesting stuff. Can a user delete this object? And that's how you find what an object actually does. It's not by what the BHAV names are called, it's what's in this table. Speaking of what an object does, how do you then find how a sim can interact with this object. You know, people go, oh yeah, it's the TTAB table. Here we go, I've got a TTAB table and it's got no entries in it, so what the hell is going on? Because I can definitely interact with this cuddly bear. Well, again, the object definition tells you. If you look in the object definition and you go down to resource cross-references, there is an interaction table ID there, and it is interaction table ID 1. If we go and look at this TTAB, it's actually instance 83. So it's not that one. So where does that one appear? Well, it's in the semi-global group. If I let's do this way. Go and look at the semi-globals. Just time amongst yourselves while SimPE loads up the file tables. So, what were we painting? Semi-global sculpture. What its semi-globals were. Embarrassing. Paintings. Of course, the cuddly bear is a painting global. Of course it is. Why would it be anything else? Under painting global. If we search down here, there will be a high menu functions with an entry. There's two of them. There's one with an entry of 1 and one with an entry of 2. We fill in the one with the entry of 1. It's strings as well. We now have TTAB entry 1 from the semi-globals, and that's what it is acting on. So again, the actions that a sim can interact with on an object is determined by what the object data tells you to look for, not the TTAB that happens to be in the object. It may not be relevant at all. Maxis have a handy habit of leaving old ones lying around. It is that interaction table table ID, and as far as I can work out, interaction group is not used. It's very similar for slots. If you want to find out what the slots are, you look for the slot ID, instance 80. My slot in my local group will always be used first, so it's going to use that slot file. Again, don't just assume that because there is a slot resource in an object that the object is actually using those slots. It could be using semi-global slots, though I don't actually think there are any semi-global slots, but it could be.
So if an object is, say you want to create a custom TTAB for an object that doesn't have a TTAB, would you import the semi-global, or would you tell the OBJD to point to a different TTAB? Which would be better?
If you want to keep most of the functions on its existing menu, import the semi-global. If you just want to create some blank some new entries, and you're not worried about the fact that the cuddly bear is a painting, interesting concept, then you could create a new one, or you could just import one from an object that has very similar functions that you want. You can then either change the object definitions entry to point to the TTAB you imported. So if the object definition was saying use 1 and your TTAB you imported was 80, you can either renumber the TTAB TTASs to be 1, or you can tell the object definition to use 80. It really doesn't matter which way round you do. Yeah. But it is that link. It's not because there is a TTAB in the object that it gets used. It's because there is a link that tells it what to use.
Because the OBJD is pointing to that specific T-tab. That's why why the sim
the
can
OBJ
access it in game.
Yeah, the OBJD is like the spider in the middle of the web. It controls what is being used. Yeah, interesting questions. I'm not sure there are any semi-global slots. But that's kind of the everything in an object starts from the OBJD. Yeah. You need to follow it out from the OBJD, not from what's necessarily in the objects package file. We've touched on some of this, what's in a BHAVs aim, I suppose. Any questions on OBJD before we move on?
I was going to ask, I think I'm still struggling to understand what makes something local or not, because I understand the semi-global stuff and the global, how they are being called inside the package, but the OBJD, the definitions, they are all referencing an instance, but why wouldn't I be able to, for example, reference an instance, I mean, something that is outside of my package? Like, instead of referencing a TTAB that I have imported inside of my package, so I'm now cloning that resource, why wouldn't I just, why can't you just reference something outside of the package, so that way you don't have like clone or copies of something else?
Because you can only access stuff that's in the semi-global group, global group, or what is local to your object. So if you have object A, it is in group 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, say. Object B is in group 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. They can both have BHAV with an instance of 1000, 1001, 1002. But within an object, you find things purely by instance number, not by group and instance. Yeah. Locating within an object purely by instance. If it's 1000, it's in the local group. If it's 2000, it's in the semi-global group, and if it's 100, it's a global. Yeah. So you can't get to BHAV 1002 in object B because it would look for BHAV 1002 in its own object because it's local.
Okay.
Because you're not going by the other objects group.
But then why does Simpy always, when he's cloning objects, why doesn't it like keep the original group as is, since that's sort of what Maxis was doing, if I understand correctly? Like, they had groups that made some of the objects local, so they should be able to reference other objects functions, I mean resources.
No, because there's nothing that says go to an arbitrary group number and get BCON 1003. You just say get BCON 1003, and because it starts 1000, it's in the object definitions group.
Okay.
Yeah, it's a way of putting walls around objects so they don't stomp on other people's code or things. It's a restriction on the system. If when you run Object Workshop, if it kept the same group number as your Maxis objects, what you'd end up doing is overwriting the code in that Maxis object. That might be what you want to do. 9 times out of 10, it's not.
Yeah, but you said in the beginning that when Simpy clones the object, it changes the group to something like 0FFFFF, and then the game hashes that based on the object's file name, right?
To a unique group, yes.
Okay,
so
but why wouldn't I be able to just set a custom group, like, I don't know, instead of the FFF, something else? You can't?
You can.
Yeah?
Yeah. So
Because that's what Maxis does, right? It doesn't have...
In my Cuddly Bear group here, I can change all of these to group OX7F12367. Got enough letters there? 8. I can do that.
Yeah. And then now that you've done that, now the game will not hash it based on the file name because it's no longer in that special group of FFFFF, right?
Correct. Yep.
Okay. So if I just set the group as something, I mean, following some of Max's way of attributing each group value, I could technically do a custom object that is referencing Max's code that I'm not overriding if I do things correctly.
Which object? You've now got 2 objects in the same group. Which object does Maxis know? Which object does Maxis know to use?
Sorry, I don't understand that question.
So if there was another object with this same group number,
yes,
I've just overwritten all of the Maxis code that was in that group.
Right, but if they don't have the same instances, then they're not the same resources, right?
They're not the same resources.
Because I'm thinking about it in a way that, for example, I keep thinking about Mutilda's. No, it's not Mutilda's. Sorry, it's Monique's hack computer. A lot of people replace stuff because they do alternate versions of their computers because they're missing a whole lot of interactions and code that are related to that specific computer that they want, right? But what if they are all put inside the same group and it's all about, I don't know, it's the same group for things related to computers, right? So then they should be able to just reference the original mod's code.
But then every single object which is a clone of Monique's computer would be in the same group. So they've all got to talk to each other and make sure they don't use the same instance number for the object data or the object functions. And you're relying on everybody who's ever been or ever will be in the future using different instance numbers and OBJFs and whatever. And they're all just working. You might be able to get it to work, but it's like you're still only going to have one global group, by the way.
Of course.
So you probably could bend it like that, but it was not designed to work that way, and you're really going to run into all kinds of conflict issues left, right, and center. You only need one person to come along and go, oh, this object doesn't have Beacon 1008, I'll just add Beacon 1008, and there's some other computer somewhere which was using Beacon 1008 and now it's been stomped on. And the conflict between this I wish you luck.
I understand the issue. Okay. Okay, thanks for the answer. Sorry for the
So BHAVs have an arbitrary name. They're located by group and instance in either semi-global, global, or local. As I said, because a function is called function in, it doesn't mean it's the object's initialization method. And you can pretty much rename BHAVs as you want. There is only one primitive where the BHAV name is important, and that's called run tree by name. And it actually goes off and looks in an object's BHAV stack find a BHAV by name. They usually start with CT, although Maxis do break this rule. And it's one thing that with Monique's computer is actually would be a better way of doing it. You could, if your BHAVs are set up the correct way just to work as a function and return what they want, you can use run tree by name to access Monique's original computer. It does mean you have to have that object installed and get an instance of it, but you can then call objects on it. It's how the game's controllers work, the things that push kids to go to schools, adults to go to work, things like that. They use run tree by name. But that's the only time when a BHAV name is important. And they usually start with CT, but Maxis do break their own rules, so take care if you decide to rename Maxis BHAVs. We're kind of wandering off into very advanced programming if we start talking about RTBNs, and this is not what this was about. I'm going to get on to one of Jason's questions. I would love to understand the relationship between BHAVs and BCONs better. Why do BHAVs need to point to BCONs? Simple answer, they don't. How do we unravel what BCON a BHAV is pointing to? You look at the code. And does a BCON really need a TRCN resource, which is its labels? Must it have one? No. Should it have one? Probably. So if we have a BCON 1000, which has an entry in it, line 0 has a value of 0, a number of overlays, somewhere in our code, in our BHAV, there will be something that says something along the lines of local 0 equals const 1000 colon 0. And this is the only thing that links a BHAV to a BCON. There is a specific line of code that says go and drag the value out of this BCON, this constant value. Look in BCON 1000 and take the entry in the 0th position. And we can change that value to a 2 or a 3 or a 4, and that's what will be dragged out. There is another way of accessing BCONs, which is by using this const and then a square bracket and temp. So if we shove the value 1 or 2 into this, we would go and get it into the temporary variable. At 3, we would get the entry const 1002 3. Yeah. So there are two ways of accessing a BCON, and that is the only link between a BHAV and a BCON, what the actual code is looking at. Other than that, no magic. So why do we use BCONs? One place to store common values. If we had 5, 6, 7, 10 blocks of code that all wanted to access the same value, rather than sprinkling that number 8 throughout our code, we can put it in a constant, we can access the constant. We then just access the constant 8 times. If we then need to change it from 6 to 10, we change it in one place. We don't have to search through all the code to find it. So that's why we as programmers do it. It also means it's very easy for user configuration. Rather than telling users to go to 5 places in the code and change value 6 to 10 5 times, we can point them at a single BCON and say, change that. It will change the number of times a person stomps his feet when he can't get somewhere from the default of 6 to a super mega stompy of 10 or whatever. Following on from that, we could also make what is quite complex user configuration, we can make it easier. By putting our numbers into BCONs, we can make the code more complex, make it easier to configure. An example of this is what Jason was looking at last week, the overlay box. I'd put all of the collection instance IDs into a beacon and the number of overlays that there were in another beacon, and the code then read how many there were and dynamically built menus and options. I personally find it easier to then tell a user that, oh, to add another entry you change the number of overlays from 3 to 4 and you add more pairs at the ends of beacons, yeah, add things in, than to say, oh yeah, and you need to go to this piece of code and you need to change that, and you need to go to another piece of code and you change that. So you end up with something that's called data-driven programming. All the data in one place and the code reads the data, and then you want it to do more things, you just increase the size of the data. So, have I answered your question, Jason?
Yes, pretty much. The only doubt that I had was the TRCN. So they're not, for example, if you look at Morax OG overlay box, that did not have TRCN, so it was super confusing to figure out which line of the beacon represented what.
It's about 3 slides further on, the answer to that.
Oh, okay.
You had another question with which are, what are params? Params, parameters, arguments, or args. God knows why Maxis has 4 names for the same thing, or programmers do. It's a way. They are ways to pass values to BHAV to make it do different things. So if you look in the BHAV editor, there is this thing over here called arg count. An arg is an argument, which is a parameter, so it's taking 2 parameters. Yeah. As we talked about in the demystifying the BHAV editor, they are accessed as param0 and param1. This very simple chunk of code here says I want to calculate a percentage of a number. If we had to write a BHAV that said calculate 75% of 8, calculate, and another one that said calculate 75% of 9, and another one that said calculate 76% of 8, and another one that said calculate 76% of 9, we would be here all night. What parameters allow us to do is it allows us to calculate %x of value y, and we can pass x and y into the BHAV. Yeah? And it then mashes those numbers, produces a result, and we use that answer. So it's a way of being able to pass different values to a BHAV to make it operate on different data. It's not really do different things. I've included a link down there which to a PDF that goes into more detail about all of the basics of semantics, variables, literals, stack objects and things.
I will link that in the video description as well.
And labels, because you will forget. So this is a set of labels that I've got for one of my actual BHAVs. They are in the TPRP. I have no idea what it stands for. And yeah, in a couple of months, I'm really going to remember that parameter 2 is the accumulated vomit factor. By the way, these are from my roller coaster. And again, as you said, the labels for a beacon are held in the TRCN. This is a beacon where I deleted the TRCN, and all we know is that line 0 has a value of 1E, 1 has a value of 46, 2 has a value of F. I have no idea if I can change these values, what changing these values would affect, yeah, or whatever. As soon as I put labels on it, we now know that this is the per turn fun increase. This is how much the fun can go to maximum. Energy increase, energy max, they must be from jumping on sofas or something. So as you jump on a sofa, your energy goes down because FFE2 is a negative number, but your fun goes up. So you could tweak these and change them so that your energy goes up faster or down slow, or whatever you want. Yeah, heartfelt. Labeling your BCONs means you don't have to keep telling your players either to RTFM or what the values are actually used for. It's self-commenting. Somebody who takes a mod or an object can go in, they can look at the BCONs, they can read the values, and they can go, I've possibly got a good chance of being able to change how this operates. Yeah. So yeah, both BCONs and BHAVs should really have labels. This is actually a case of do as I say, don't do as I do. I'm really bad for labeling my code. Oh yeah, I remember what that did. Oh fuck, what did that do? But yeah, no. They're just ways of labeling stuff. It's very little overhead, and it makes it so much easier to maintain.
Yes. Yeah, TRCNs are super helpful. For example, I think in the case like with Morag's original box, it didn't really matter because she only set it up to apply 5 overlays. So you're not going to get lost. But I've done, for example, some of my Merry Minstrels boxes use 60 some accessories, or trying to remember another example, that the arrow boxes, I used to be an adventurer. I think I pushed very close to the top threshold. I had 100 or so accessories in each box. And if you don't have a TRCN, you don't know what call value that beacon is supposed to point to.
Yeah, I think not sure what you call it, but it's basically the male genitalia, shall we call it, mod that you've got. I think one of those beacons is running close to 400 entries. Yeah. All the different colours, all the different sizes, and all the different styles. So yeah.
There are a lot of choices.
Yes, because you will forget. And trust me, I was looking at something about 2 hours ago going, what the hell is that? Okay, so that's kind of what we should be doing. This is all very well, but how do we actually find where we need to insert our code? Something Rachel Chamfel asked quite some time ago was, how do you get it so that a pre-free time object can gain enthusiasm as you're reading it? It's not an unreasonable question. Really comes down to 2 questions. One, how the heck do we find out where the sim is in the code when they're reading it? And the other half of it is, given that we probably don't know how to code that ourselves, how can we find some code which is very similar to what we want to do? I.e., don't write it yourself, steal it from somewhere else. And to be honest, that is probably the hardest thing, the hardest 2 questions to answer from a programming of The Sims 2 point of view. Yeah. Where do I actually put this? And what should I put in there? So we need to know things that call BHAVs. As we've seen, an OBJF can call a BHAV. The TTAB entry can call BHAVs. BHAVs call BHAVs themselves. Primitives hide calling of BHAVs within their... Some of them have events. So when an animation runs, there is an event that happens. When a timer goes off, there is an event that happens. When you send a sim to a location, when they get there, there is an event that happens. And an event is merely just a piece of code. And if you go and look at something like spell casting, all of a sudden the magician has a wand in their hand. That wand actually gets there by an animation event. As the animation is playing, there is a thing that says right at the beginning of the animation, generate a wand in my hand, and that comes off an event. There's also the RTBN, run tree by name primitive. But these are things that call BHAVs, and we're really interested in the first two when we're looking for something. Possibly the first three. So if we're looking for a thing that adds enthusiasm, we may be able to deduce from an object within an object that already adds enthusiasm from the BHAV names. But usually Maxis don't make them particularly useful. They're things like loop chat. Oh yeah, great. More than likely, we know that if a sim walks up to a magazine and clicks read, then somewhere in that point they start gaining enthusiasm. So we probably know the menu text that leads us into that code. We know from clicking a menu, the menu item is read, or it's, you know, take shower, or it's wash dog or something, that gets us vaguely doing what we're interested in. The other thing that can be quite a useful way to track these down is if you know text that appears in a dialogue or a notification. So, you know, little Johnny has to leave for school in an hour. That comes up in a notification text. So we could search some text strings. So really it's a case of what do we actually know that we can start looking from, rather than this big whole Maxis code base, which is absolutely huge. Can we track it down? Is there an object that has a menu item on it? Well, you know, how do we find the object? How do we, once we got the object, we can find the menu, or how can we find a string? There are two tools. One is built into SimPE. It's called the PJSE Resource Finder. And the other one was written by yours truly. It's called BHAV Finder, but we're going to look at PGSE Resource Finder first. And the easiest way to do that is to bring up SimPE. In the Blue Peter fashion, we're going to switch to objects.package, because I know it makes Latmos giggle every time I edit it. So here we have a whole load of Maxis objects. We could sort these and we can search for them. But under Tools, PJSE, there is a Semantics Resource Finder. It brings up this really, really useful dialog. And we can say, search our current package, and we want to search for an object name, and we want to search for bear. And we click go, and it will go off, and it will search every single object name within our currently open package, usually our Maxis one, and find any object name that contains the word bear. So there's a sewing machine craftable teddy bear, there's a sculpture wood carving big bear, stuffed animal teddy bear. So that is a way that we can find an object to start from. We can also search BHAV names. So if we know that it's to do with a school bus, or going to work, we could search for walk to work, or we could just search for work. If you search for walk to work and it's not specifically called that, then it's not going to find anything. If you search for work, it's a more broad term. Okay, it will find more things, but at least you can then look in this list of 8 or 9 list here. If we know what the object is called, but we don't know what the object name is, because sometimes the name of an object bears no resemblance to what's in the catalogue. So we had those colonial curtains. I can search for colonial in the CTSS. So this is going to search all the CTSS strings, the text colonial. And it goes off and it will tell you rather unhelpfully that they are in group 1209D17 and you have to go and then find these groups and find the strings. If we pick one of those, let's say FD7F, so what I tend to do, I go into CTSS, I sort by group. What was I after? FD7F, and we scroll down till we find there are many ways of doing this. FD7F, there he is. So that's the cozy colonial end table. If I now want all the resources to deal with that, I do it a different way to some people. I click on all resources, I then click on sort by group. Because I had this CTSS highlighted, it brings it back into view, and from there to there is all the resources related to that object. So I could start looking for BHAVs, BCONs, strings, or whatever I was after and start digging in that way. Unfortunately, a static end table has no functionality, so it's not a terribly useful example. You can search in the stro hashes as well, so if you know the text that was in a dialogue, you can search for that and it will find all the strings that are in there, and you can then look in the objects and start finding out the code. Again, you can search the TTAs, which is the menu entries, and as you can see, you can click multiples of these at the same time. And it is a very, very useful tool for finding stuff, finding a starting point. If I can find a menu to start from, I can follow through its guardians and actions and find the code I'm looking for. The other option is PGSE Resource Finder on steroids, and it's an application I wrote called BHAV Finder. It can be used to answer much more complex and precision-focused questions. I can use it to find old versions of relationship primitives. We were looking at node versions in demystifying the BHAV editor. Dialogue primitives that use a specific style. What code creates token poison ivy? How do we access lot-in? What calls want satisfy kiss? Which code uses the firefly jar animations? And any of my mods who use the money globals. I'm not going to go through all of those, and I'm not going to go through things, but it's a much more powerful interface. Again, it searches the packages. It will search objects that will package, but you can also put a directory in here. You can tell it to search every single package within the Maxis codebase. So if it was hiding in the Christmas special ones, the Santa ones, you can search for that. Where it differs from PGSE Resource Finder is not only can you search by opcode, manage inventory, you can search for specific operands. And I happen to have previously found out that the GUID for poisoned ivy was 33.6.97.56, and it's going to search for those specific values in those specific places. You have to know how primitives hang together. But it also, not only does it tell you the instance of the BHAV, but it gives you the nice name of the object that it occurs in, or if it's a global. So it takes a little bit of learning. There is a huge web page for it. it does find code a lot quicker. There's an animation, there's a primitive which is called reach put, and it takes an animation, and we can say search for the opcodes of that using an operand. The animation string is in operand 11 as an index into the animations which match Firefly. Click on it, it goes forwards. You can build very powerful searches in this thing, and it just runs through and finds your code. And as I said, you can search only just a specific package file. You can also search subdirectories. So this one is saying which of my mods use the money global. So my mods live in downloads WH. And I can search for an opcode range as well. So the money globals are CA0 through CA4. CA because it's cache, in case you ever wondered. And then it will find all of my package files and BHAVs that use that code. This was quite useful when I changed some parameters around and I needed to find all the code I had just broken. There is a web page for it. It's not a simple little tool. So using those techniques, we can hopefully find somewhere to start from, because without a starting point you're kind of lost, and then it's just a case of follow the chain. If we're in a tab and we want to know how we're browsing this object, we can click on that blue action BHAV link, and it will open up the BHAV, and we can read the code. So we've picked one that's not too horrendous. There you go, that's a good one. And as we learnt with demystifying the BHAV editor, the first thing you should do on any Maxis code is sort it.
Yeah, that is some spaghetti right there.
Yep. And then we can then start reading this through, and if we get to another call, so there's a semi-global call down here, EP3 restock bill shop owner. What does that do? Well, we could go and find it, but if we come up, there's another view BHAV up here, and we can click that one, and we've got that window open as well. And we can keep going, and the beauty of it is you can move these windows around and you've got multiple windows open at the same time. So I can jump backwards and forwards between following code in one and following code in the other. The other really good thing about following code this way is these windows are all read-only. You can make as many changes in here as you like, but there is no save button. They will not save. They are just read-only changes. Whereas if I'd gone and found the BHAV through the resource tree, if I now make changes here, and I can commit this, and it will make the changes. So for a way of following code, especially Maxis code, this ability to pop things up in a new window, it's really handy because you can't make any changes here. This is read only. So it's a case of following it through, sorting it. Again, if we look at OBJFs, same thing here. Our init function, I can click on the little blue action BHAV link here, and I can follow this code through. Again, you know, it's only 4 lines, Maxis. Why? Okay. Would it have hurt you to have sorted it? And then, as it says on the slide, patience you must have, my young Padawan. You just need to follow it logically, understand it, get down, find the bit that goes, oh, this adds enthusiasm. Ah, okay, so this is the code I'm going to need. On the magazines, which are pre-free time, you can follow into the same code. It's got the same read. You can add that code in, or you can add it into your own object. Yeah.